As of right now, it seems like the Granolah arc is definitely going to transition into a future arc soon. And because of that, in today's video we're going to talk about one of the most positive things about the Granolah arc, the one thing about the arc that regardless of your criticisms or my criticisms or the community's criticisms, we can all generally and universally agree is good. And that, my friends, is Granolah's path to redemption. But before we get into Granolah's path to redemption, we should first start off by talking about character design, because Granolah is one of the coolest looking Dragon Ball characters ever, and that's universally agreed upon by many fans, because he has that unique Dragon Quest-like style in a very heroic way, which is why earlier in the arc, it was always odd seeing Granolah as a quote-unquote bad guy because he doesn't look like a bad guy. And then he also has those Sharingan-type eyes like Sasuke from the Naruto series, combined with the fact that he looked ridiculously cool as a Super Cerelian 3 right before he cut his hair. I actually think Granolah would have looked a lot cooler had he kept that design, because Goku could have made a joke here or there about, Granolah resembling a Super Saiyan 3, but ultimately, that combined with the different abilities that he actually has, Granolah is a very unique character in his own right, and regardless of what happens to this arc or how this arc ends, he's a great character to have long term in the Dragon Ball series when you combine that with his backstory. When I started reading the arc, and when I started learning a little bit more about Granolah and the comparisons between the cerelians and also the Saiyans, and the whole thing that we learned in the past about Planet Path and Planet Plant and so on and so forth, the thing about Granolah that really separated him from other Dragon Ball characters was really how much he was really like Baby, but in more of a good way. Now obviously both characters wanted revenge, but they go about it in two completely different ways, right? Baby, also in comparison to Hachiak, they were essentially created for revenge, by Dr. Mew, even though Baby actually was the one that created Dr. Mew to basically create himself, which I found was really interesting about him as a character. And then when you also compare that to Hachiak, who was basically born of the hatred towards the Saiyans, I find it fascinating that you have a situation where you have these artificial beings that were basically created by the Sufurians, or the Tuffles if you want to go with the English word, to have revenge on the Saiyans. And I think because of that, you see more variety in the character emotions. You see Granolah go through a learning path, through everything that he has, whereas Baby was completely hell-bent on doing what he was doing. And the metaphor between what Baby was doing, I felt, was one of the most interesting things, because Baby literally got inside of Vegeta's body and wanted to use Vegeta's body to basically get revenge on everybody else. So, in a lot of ways, the method to how Baby was planning to get his revenge, by being a weaker character that preyed on stronger characters essentially to be the best Tuffle-like being he could possibly be, was a really, really interesting thing, especially how he eventually took over Vegeta's body. He basically took over the body of the descendant, coming from the person who originally tormented his race and wiped them out, essentially. So, from that point of view, Granolah also had a cheap-like way that he also took over main characters, in this case specifically being that he used the Dragon Balls to essentially wish for himself to be the strongest character in the universe, at least at that point of time. So both characters have a method to leap starting and getting powerful enough to combat our characters in their own cheap way, but the way that they do it fits their personalities. Granolah is a bandit that wants to get things over and quick, and Baby wants to take over somebody else's body and essentially get those Saiyans to become slaves to his own will. So, in a lot of ways, Baby doesn't want to wipe out the Saiyan race. He wants to empower it for his own benefit, which in many ways leads to a lot of Dragon Ball fans always wondering, what if Baby had actually taken over Goku's body? That would have been a really interesting thing. But as we move on here to another point here, guys, we need to actually talk about his actual fight with Goku and Vegeta. Now, the thing is that when Granolah goes to meet with Goku and Vegeta. The interesting thing is that Goku and Vegeta make it very clear that Granolah has the wrong guys. And if this was another character that was more loquacious, I guess you could say, a character that in a lot of ways would be willing to explain themselves a bit more, Granolah probably would have never fought them, because that character would explain, no, Granolah, let me explain to you, piece by piece what exactly happened, but he happened to choose a fight with two Saiyan eager-like characters, which is one of the reasons why they even fought in the first place. If Granolah truly understood what was going on, and if Granolah was to talk to a character that was more talk and less action, the whole arc would have never have taken place. But because Goku and Vegeta specifically are so eager to fight, they eventually got into a fight by accident with Granolah, and we happen to see, some of the best action scenes of the whole arc. Regardless of how well it was written, the action sequences with Granolah were fantastic, especially when Granolah was fighting against Ultra Ego Vegeta. So to be specific in that sense, I feel like the accidental battles between Granolah and Goku really hyped up the arc, and whenever Gas comes later on to become the quote-unquote real villain, then we get into the further points. But I definitely think meeting Goku and Vegeta and also learning the truth about Bardock later on really gave the arc some level of substance, because you can see Granolah slowly building credibility with these characters and moving on. And that takes us directly to the character of Elec. So, obviously, earlier in the arc, before Granolah wished to be as strong as he was, it was always hinted that Gas was extremely powerful, the way that, Elec was always talking about him, so on and so forth. This was before that we saw that flashback scene where Bardock got into a fight with him. And the interesting thing about all of this is that through pain, Granolah truly figured out who was on his side. Because at the end of the day, when the battle with Gas happened, it was Goku and Vegeta that had his back. And a lot of times when you see a character like Elec, who is completely manipulative in the situation, a lot of times in life, you're put in a situation where you're not really sure who's on your side, right? And specifically, when you figure out that the people that you're fighting against, your enemies, are essentially more on your side than the people that you worked for to some extent, that really changes your perspective on life. And I feel like seeing Granolah having to go through that path of learning more about who the Heeters really were, in addition to the fact that Goku and Vegeta don't have that same aggressive to humanity type nature that the other Saiyans did, even though Vegeta originally had it and Bardock originally had it, I feel like the message of this arc is that everybody can change. Bardock can change, Vegeta can change, and so can Granolah. Granolah can change too. The question is, though, Granolah ultimately ended up sparing Gas, so does this also mean that Granolah believes in his heart that Gas can change in the future? Because in a lot of ways, you can look at Gas as this innocent, childlike character who has these incredible rage monster-like abilities being controlled by his brother, because the real villain of this arc is Elec. So the real question is, can Gas change the way that Granolah can change? See, that's another interesting question, that we can learn more about it. And, ultimately, when you look at the end of the Granolah arc and the defeat of Gas itself, in a lot of ways, it makes you feel somewhat sympathetic to Gas. And it also makes you feel good for Granolah, because when Granolah finally defeated Gas and Gas falls to the ground, in a lot of ways, it's like Granolah has been freed. Like, his mind has been purified. He's been completely redeemed from the path that he was going down and learning the truth about Goku and Vegeta and all of that. And now he's his own man. Now, granted, he doesn't have a lot of time left to live because he made that wish. But the question is now is that Gas is essentially a slave. He is a slave of his own brother. And what I think will make this arc really interesting is if we see Gas eventually having a mind of his own and actually rebelling against his brother or joining the side of our heroes. Because remember, Gas in many ways is very similar to Kid Buu, as I explained in one of my most recent videos. But he does have enough of a mind on his own that he can at least think for himself, especially when he's not in his rage monster-like state. And it would be an interesting thing to figure out if, you know, if Gas is a character that can essentially break out of the shackles that his brother is putting on him and become his own man, sort of say, or become his own Heater, because, I mean, he's not human, you know, but that is one of the interesting things too. And I feel like looking at Granolah's path and his relationship with Monaito, I really feel in a lot of ways, and I think you could relate this a lot to real life, that you're always gonna have like that one person who's not directly related to you, but is like a guardian in your life. You look at a character like Monaito, who was always essentially there, like a surrogate type father to Granolah from a distance, and when you compare that to Granolah, whose mother was lost by the Heeters, and when you find out that it was actually Goku's father that tried to help Granolah's mother, you know, it's one of those things in life where you sometimes bump into situations where somebody who you perceived as an enemy actually does good things for you. And in a situation like Granolah, he's actually learning this multiple times. And he's also learned, you know, and gone down the path of freedom because he always had somebody like Monaito in his life that was, you know, guiding him. So essentially, we are looking at a situation of space bandits, because basically that's what Granolah is, and that's what the Heeters are. But after this arc, it would be really interesting to see if the Heeters would eventually become allies to our characters, but it doesn't seem like Elec will, because Elec is ultimately the big bad of this arc. So ultimately, guys, I just wanted to have more of a interesting video about Granolah's path to redemption. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and have a great day.